Hey guys, it's Tom Bucks here. Welcome to MSD.TV. I noticed that there is something different about me today. That's right, it's my voice. My voice is a little bit, kind of lost. I'm glad you guys have noticed. Thank you for caring. That's how I appreciate you guys. And I also lost a bit of weight. If you also noticed the change in my appearance, it's my weight and nothing else at all. But this video here is about NAWCQ rulings. I'm only going to be covering 2 card-based rulings, and as for the rest of it, it's going to be about time rulings and arguments between opponents, because I personally actually had to deal with some of this stuff, and judges came in. They were very professional. Thank you for ruling the way that you guys did, and now I can actually share with people my knowledge. And speaking of rulings, just a quick shout out to myself. I guess I passed RC2, so now I have ruling and comprehension level 2 certified. So that's good news for me. So it just gives this a little bit more credibility. Maybe not. It just means I know what I'm talking about from the most cases, in terms of problem solving card text, conjunctions, and how things resolve in most cases. Especially, I like to cover the confusing topics. But let's start off with the card that is most misplayed or illegally played in the entire tournament. It is Called by the Grave. So let's read over this card text first. Target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. Okay, let's break this one down. So it does sound a bit confusing near the end, but you can actually break it down into 2 parts: the activated effects and the effects on the field. Why else would it word it like this, where of monsters with the same original name? That actually applies to both of them, and you can actually break it apart and it would still make sense. And knowing Konami does not put redundancies inside the card text, especially with the problem solving card text. There should not be any form of redundancy in there. So if you try to apply only to monster effects on the field, then you are wrong, because there would be redundancy in the entire effect. But reading this, let's just break it down for everyone. If we remove the first part of the activated effects, it would sound something like this. Target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. Does that apply to activated effects? Well, of course it does, because all effects, whether it be trigger, lingering, ignition, quick effect, all effects would still be negated, and most of these were activated effects, so why bother stating the activated effects? So now we're going to take away the part that states effects on the field. So target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects of monsters with the same original name. So putting those sentences together, well, kind of still makes sense. It just means that whether you activate from your hand, whether you activate it from the graveyard, the extra deck, main deck, or banish pile, it doesn't matter where you activate it from, it will still be negated. And combining the two, it just means that the continuous effects and lingering effects of stuff that's on the field for that card is also negated. And if you activate it from anywhere, whether it be from your hand or graveyard or anywhere else, it will also be negated. So in the example where you're holding a copy of Effect Veiler, and your opponent uses Called by the Grave, and you have a second copy of Effect Veiler that you did not chain to, if you activate that second copy of Effect Veiler and send it to the graveyard, it will not get its effect resolved properly. It will be negated. So now that we know how this card is actually worded and how it's, I guess, supposed to be ruled, I've seen people argue in terms of an example at WCQ of how they try to use this to get some advantage. So say my opponent summons out Candina, I play my copy of Ash Blossom Joyous Spring to counter it, they chain Called by the Grave. Okay, that sounds normal. And then I normal summon out my Candida and they chain their Ash Blossom Joyous Spring. Theirs is technically negated, but they'll argue that this is not a card on the field, therefore it's not negated, blah 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 blah. But if you read the card carefully, it's the activated effects and the effects on the field. So activated effects encompasses all the places, and the effects on the field encompasses all types of effects on the field regarding that monster with the same original name. Okay, so that being said, depending on how people do, they kind of argue both ways, and it's quite disgusting when you see the exact same player argue one way when it was giving them an advantage and argue the other way when it was giving them a disadvantage. It was a bit mind-boggling, and you can call a judge over. They read the card, then they're taking their best guess at it too. So that's basically it. And a lot of people are afraid to call a judge on something that seems so minor and should be like common knowledge, but because the wording is a bit weird, and therefore I can understand why people didn't want to call a judge over and like basically burn the timer, yeah, stuff like that. So nightmare cards were a bit of a nightmare to a lot of people because they just don't know how the conjunctions worked and whatnot. And even some of the judges, I had to immediately appeal after I got my ruling. So my example here is this. I'm controlling a Mekk-Knight Purple that has a chainable effect to remove itself from the field. My opponent, under a code link, special summons out a Nightmare Cerberus, and it's code linked to a Goblin, which is cool. And he activates the effect, pays the cost, which is the card, and then proceeds to attempt to pop my Mekk-Knight Purple. Purple will now chain, banishing itself, giving myself a search, and he attempts to draw a card. We all know that that's not possible due to the fact that the wording says, then draw one card. Now, because of the then clause, we're gonna have to do a quick review on clauses and the whole conjunctions all together. If it says, and if you do, you have to do A, and if you can do B, you do B. If it happens, it's simultaneous. Cool. Then there's the then conjunction. A must happen, then B happens. If A does not happen, B does not happen. If A happens but B cannot, A still happens. But it is not simultaneous. And if you do, it's simultaneous. And then there's also and, where both A and B must happen, or neither will happen. And finally, there's also, which cares about neither. If A doesn't happen, B can still happen. If B happens, then A doesn't have to happen. Or if you get A and B happening, well, then they're both happening. So there you go. So in other words, because the wording of the nightmare cards does require the then draw whatever, it doesn't care about the condition of the code link if the first part of it cannot even be met. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So that's the nightmare stuff. And let's talk about time rule. I know some of you guys are mainly here for the time rule, but let's just talk about it regarding arguments within time. First of all, you have to be aware that both you and your opponent are able to agree or not agree to enter the battle phase. When you pass priority to your opponent saying, I want to go into battle phase, and your opponent says, okay, let's go into battle phase, it just means he has also passed their priority to activate any sort of card effects. So now you will proceed to the main phase once both players have agreed, which is the typical case. No, not everyone kind of asks for the agreement. Normally it's more likely to be interrupted, being like, hold on, still in your main phase, I activate this card. Fair enough. Okay, during time, what if your opponent attempts to stop you from entering the battle phase? Now, there's two things. One thing is slow playing. If they're preventing you from doing something while they're not able to do anything, that is slow playing guaranteed. However, if he has anything that he can possibly activate or even think about activating, then that's not technically slow playing, and you're able to actually drain down the clock, which is unfortunate. It's something a judge told me, a assistant head judge told me, that your opponent, as long as they have a valid thing to activate or to read about or to even consider, they can actually pause the phases down. So I can give you an example of what happened to me and how the judge ruled it. What happened here was that we were about to go into time. There was about 20 seconds left. My opponent summons out a Candina. I activate Ash Blossom Joyous Spring. He proceeds to set 2 cards and pass. My turn, I have a handful of Mekk-Knights. I special summon out Mekk-Knight Purple. And then I proceed to set 2 cards. And then my opponent chains Heavy Storm Duster. So I can't summon out the second Mekk-Knight. I have no other cards I can activate. I proceed into battle phase. And then I attempt to attack, and then time was called. And then after time was called, my opponent was like, oh, I didn't let you enter battle phase. I'm still in main phase. And to me, I'm like, oh boy, it's gonna be one of those situations. So we were calling a judge because it was already in time and the judge needs to confirm what phase it is and whatnot. So then we had an argument between phases, whether or not it was the battle phase or was it the main phase. So the ruling came down to was this. Both of us need to agree to go into the battle phase, and my opponent says he does not agree to go into the battle phase, which is completely a valid reason. However, my opponent must have at least one card that is available to activate to kind of contemplate to go in. So he can think about that one card that he can choose to activate. If he has a single card, it would have still been in the main phase. In other words, if he did not quickly use that heavy storm duster, we would still be in the main phase. He could have argued it, it would went in his favor. So I told the judge what happened. What happened was the judge basically was like, oh, you can't go into the battle phase until you both agree. And after I give him my story, we played the entire thing. The judge asked my opponent, so what were you going to activate? And looking at, he has only 2 cards in hand and 1 card in the back. The judge checked everything, saying, so what were you going to activate? Just asked him, what were you going to activate? And there was nothing. There was nothing. Oh, and then he tried to say, I'm just going to read the card. Nothing. There was nothing he can activate. And then the judge says, well then, guess it's the battle phase. Because there was nothing that could have stopped him. So from there, I just attacked in the basic I got game because this backer was a Widow Anchor. The Widow Anchor cannot be activated, and stuff in hand definitely cannot be activated because definitely not a Lycris. If there was a Lycris in hand, the backer was like a Reincarnation or anything like that, it would have been the main phase. And I would have to accept it because it's true, both players must be able to agree to proceed to the next phase as long as you're no one stalling. Because if someone's attempting to stall, they could intentionally stalling, it could just mean that they're trying to slow play you into time, which is unfortunate, but it is also something that's possible. And I get what this judge did was perhaps a bit out of the book. It's not exactly proper per se, but it is one of the most fair rulings I've heard regarding like the time argument within the phases. It was very clear cut of what could have happened. There was no confusion, and the problem was if you do it like that, some players might be salty and some players might start accusing each other of like say cheating or like attempt purposefully slow playing and stuff like that, forcing a draw, stuff like that. I understand that by exposing this much knowledge to the other player, it just makes people feel uneasy. So what I've basically come down to accepting is that this new time rule is making players behave poorly, because it is within the player's job to do whatever they can to secure victory and move on to the next round with another W, but it's making players go so far out of their normal character, unless that is their normal character, or exposing their character into securing the win. And I don't know if that's a good thing in the long run, because it is painting a lot of these players in a very negative light. But that's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit me up with a thumbs up. If you guys want to see more stuff from MSD.TV, and I've got a GOAT match coming between 2 players. We have Logan Johnson, which is a very, very strong player, and we also have Stefan Cham, also another very strong player. I believe these are West Coast players, and this is me doing a guest live duel commentary because I was fortunate enough to be able to record on the game that was outside of my own locals. So thumbs up to all of you guys. If you guys want to check it out, and they're really skilled players, hit that subscribe button. As always, don't forget to hold on to your MST.Yugi. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please drop us a like so we know we are doing a good job, and you can also subscribe to MSD.TV for more fantastic videos by clicking on the button on the left. Don't forget to check out our partners at Imperium Duelist. They make really high quality mats, including some of my own limited edition release stuff. And if you want to check out one of our past videos, click here on the right. As always, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV, and I'll see you next time.